Breaking news from Target Field, the Pohlad family really does hate the Minnesota Twins fan base. As I'm sure you are well aware of now, the Pohlads announced yesterday that they are going to pull the Minnesota Twins organization off the market, and they are going to remain as the principal ownership group. Disappointing Twins fans everywhere. The Pohlad family saw this celebration after the Keishel walk-off homer. They saw optimism in the Twins fans' eyes, and they thought, whoa, we can't go back to 2023 where we make a little bit of a playoff run. We have a little bit of hope and optimism with our fan base. We can't return to that, so we need to provide an update here. And here's in part what that update said. After a detailed and robust process, our family will remain the principal owner of the Minnesota Twins. To strengthen the club in a rapidly evolving sports landscape, one that demands strong partnerships, fresh ideas, and long-term vision, we are in the process of adding 2 significant limited partnership groups. So what are those limited partnership groups? We don't really know. What we do know from Sportico is that one of those groups is based right here in Minnesota. One of the groups is based on the East Coast. What's being speculated is that those groups are going to help cover the $440 million debt that the Pohlads have. But what's in it for those groups, we don't know. Sportico also did report that long-term is not the plan to give those groups ownership. So if that's not the plan, again, we really don't know what's in it for these groups. Maybe we'll learn more. Maybe we know. Maybe we won't learn any more as this unfolds. But what we do know, and all that really matters, is worst case scenario has happened for the Minnesota Twins fan base. The Pohlads are going to remain the team's owners. And so I want to do 2 things. I want to look back at the trade deadline, and then I want to look ahead at what that might mean. And when I look at the trade deadline, I think you can make an argument for almost every trade was a baseball move, right? The team seemingly wasn't going anywhere in 2025. We were seeing a lot of the same things we saw in 2024, even in 2023, that, yeah, they made the playoffs and everything, but they were still an inconsistent offense, really, right? And so we kind of saw this play out already. So again, you could argue most of the trades were baseball decisions, except for one, the Carlos Correa trade. And before I talk about that, I want to take a quote from Bobby Nightingale of the Star Tribune, who had an exclusive interview with Joe Pohlad. And in that interview, he said the trades had little to do with saving money and were not ordered by ownership. Those were truly primarily baseball decisions, Pohlad said. It certainly set us up for more financial flexibility, but they were primarily baseball decisions. Really? You traded a 30-year-old shortstop who was 1 season removed from an all-star game, 1 season removed from a 155 WRC+. You traded him for a 26-year-old in high A that has like a 7+ ERA. If that's a baseball decision, that's a terrible baseball decision, because it wasn't a baseball decision. It was a financial decision. You were able to clear 2/3 of Correa's salary off the books in order to save money over the next 3 years. Now, I'm not here to say that Correa lived up to his salary. He wasn't. His defense at short was already degrading. Depending on where you look, Fangraphs rated his UZR per 150 was like almost -10, which would be a poor rating. And then on Savant, he was in like the 45th percentile for runs. And so again, that's poor to below average is where Correa ranks. So, but that was serviceable. That's something that you can generally live with. His bat wasn't great this year. It was roughly league average, maybe a little bit above average, with not great defense. You can live with that. Even if he's not living up to that $30 million number, that was not a baseball decision. That was a financial decision. If you believe that line from the Pohlads, I've got oceanfront property here in Minnesota I'd love to sell you. We know what the real deal is with that Correa move. So what does it mean looking ahead? Well, I am really nervous for Pablo Lopez, maybe even Joe Ryan, maybe even Ryan Jeffers. Of course, Byron Buxton has that no trade clause. He might be the most loyal person ever to continue to say that he's going to stay with the Minnesota Twins. He has no plans of leaving. We've been waiting for Buxton to do what he's doing for, a decade at this point, and he finally does it, and the ownership group does this, and he stands by them. And so kudos to him. I can't say I would do the same thing if I was in his shoes. I'd want to be with an ownership and a team that cares and is trying to win, but good on Buxton. So he's here to stay. Not really super nervous about that, but the other three names I mentioned, specifically Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan is going to be entering his second year of arbitration next year. Then he'll have a third year in 2027 before entering free agency. He's obviously been a very good pitcher this year, maybe even Cy Young caliber in that conversation at least. And so he's going to get a pretty significant raise in arbitration this year and for sure in 2027, assuming he kind of keeps up this production. So whether they trade him this offseason at next year's trade deadline, that would be my concern, is that we are going to move on from Joe Ryan. Pablo Lopez, pretty relatively team-friendly deal for kind of his talent level. But again, he's making quite a bit of money, and so he is obviously at risk here. And then Ryan Jeffers entering his third year of arbitration this offseason. He's had a really good season for the most part, and he's only going to get more productive over the last 2 months of the season now that Christian Vasquez is out with that shoulder infection. And so his arbitration number is going to be pretty significant. Now, they don't really have any depth behind him, so if they were to move on from him, I don't know what that would mean for 2026 and who's going to be, the starting catcher or who's going to be in that platoon. But those are three names that I would worry about them trying to move. Everyone else is relatively safe. They're still on their rookie pre-arb years, or they're in arbitration, but they haven't been productive enough where you're going to be worried about too much of a salary raise. But what I am looking at is, based on those numbers, even if they keep Ryan, Lopez, Jeffers, and obviously Buxton, they are probably going to be at a $100 million salary cap, payroll at most. If the over-under was set at 100 million, I would take the under personally. And that's where we're at with Twins baseball now. As long as the Pohlad family is the ownership group, I think that's what we're looking at. We're going to continue to be in the bottom portion of baseball in payroll. We're going to have a hard time to bring talent in, something that Thad Levine had said in a recent interview. And this is the reality that we face. We're going to have to do it the homegrown way, go the Baltimore Orioles route, which seemed to work for like a year or two, but now they actually have a worse record than the Minnesota Twins because they didn't invest around their homegrown talent either. So it's not a very good recipe for success. Not a lot of teams are successful when you solely rely on homegrown talent. So it's not super optimistic. It's not the news we were hoping for. It's quite literally the worst case scenario. To continue following Twins baseball, make sure you visit twinsdaily.com and leave a comment with your thoughts on the Pohlad Group retaining ownership of the Minnesota Twins.